Well, hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for jumping on. We find that customer connectivity is something that we value greatly, and of course, in the virtual world, we've had to change how we do that. And we've found this short format sessions. They're just an hour where we can kind of talk about what we're up to, what we're seeing in the world, and most importantly, hear from customers directly about their experiences is really helpful for the community. So that's our goal today. I'm just going to jump in and just tell you a little bit about us. Qumulo's been around now almost 10 years, and we've had a singular focus of helping customers store, manage, and understand their unstructured data at massive scale. And we do that with the notion of choice, freedom, and flexibility. And down at the bottom ribbon on this slide, you can see some of the places and partners that we work with to be able to deliver our software to you. So this is like the headline here. We help customers build petabyte scale file data lakes. And this is the most important part. Simply, the world has just become too complex. People have too much going on. So simplicity, really radical simplicity, is sewn into everything that we do here in Qumulo. This is kind of a way of thinking about, like, if you really net down what we hear from virtually all of our customers. So data, especially unstructured data, continues to scale at unprecedented rates. And for some customers, that's been a reality for a long time. And for other customers, it's kind of snuck up on them. There's a new application in their business. There's a new workflow, and it's generating massive amounts of unstructured data. And yes, their budgets are growing, but they're nowhere near growing at the same rate as their data. And the way to solve the delta between those two lines is through really smart technology like Qumulo. So we pride ourselves in helping customers manage that data and stay within their budgets. This is what we hear from customers. When we go out and we talk to customers about what some of their challenges are, these are the themes. Their environments can't scale. And when you can't scale an environment, you end up building various silos of data. And when data is siloed, it is inherently inefficient, both from a cost standpoint, a cost of managing that data, and then definitely operationally. It takes more people, more time to access and collaborate around their data. The legacy vendors are a pain to deal with. They're very old school. They're basically box vendors, and they just don't treat their customers very well. We hear that time and again. You can kind of see from our branding and the way that we show up, we think of ourselves as just a different type of company in this space. The little orange grumquat says it all. We're just different. And customers seem to love that. Most of the legacy vendors are very much exclusively box focused, and that made sense 10 or 20 years ago. But virtually every customer that we talk to wants to be able to leverage public clouds in different ways. And so from day one at Qumulo, our vision was that our software would run equally well in public clouds as well as on-prem. And actually, we're going to end up talking about how that really works later on today. We're even going to demo it and show you how we enable customers to use public clouds with Qumulo. Customers can't see their data in real time. So you can, maybe you can store it, but you don't know what you have. We sometimes call this data blindness, and we say, Qumulo cures data blindness with data awareness. And we've built over the last 10 years a series of real-time analytics, and those analytics are always real-time, irrespective of the file count or the data volume. And that allows customers to operationally manage their data far more elegantly. Cost and complexity are out of control. I mentioned this earlier. Headcount, especially now, is very hard to come by. Even if you have the budget to hire people, I think we're all feeling the kind of burn of tight supply chains for physical things, but also tight supply chains for labor. And when that labor or your team members are wasting time managing complex systems, that's really tough. And then lastly, on the bottom right there, more and more of our customers want to automate workflows end to end, and they want to be able to do that using a robust, easy to manage API. So those are some of the themes of things that we hear from customers, and this is how the pain is manifested. And customers ask, geez, will my platforms meet my future needs? Will they be able to scale with me? My system's expensive, it's eating up too much of my budget. And the more budget that you spend on infrastructure, the less you can spend on the applications that fuel your business. Constantly, we hear that customers hate the support that's offered by legacy vendors. They're just so frustrated with filing tickets and begging for those tickets to be escalated, and cold handoffs and things like that. Customers want to be able to reason over their data. So increasingly, customers want to run AI and ML applications over their data sets in using really cool things like Apache Spark. And they find that interaction with their data sets with legacy vendors is really tough. I mentioned the move to the public cloud. They want to be able to do that on their schedule. So they want very often to leverage their data centers that they have existing. And then for parts of either a specific application or whole applications, they want to be able to move that to the public cloud. And then lastly, again, those IT administrators are really the firefighters of any organization, and they're just stretched too thin. And this is really our answer. This is the way that we've built Qumulo's strategy to address these very specific pain points that customers feel. There's no proprietary hardware at Qumulo. Of course, you can run Qumulo on-prem, and many of our customers do, but it's always on standard hardware. And that's really important for a few reasons. One, the quality is higher when hardware is standard. So the less proprietary hardware you have, the less risk you have. And then more recently, we've all read about these global supply chain challenges. If your storage provider is also building proprietary hardware, you as the customer are locked into a single supply chain. So with our customers, if one supply chain becomes slow, they can pick a different hardware vendor and span Qumulo environments across heterogeneous clusters, and that actually de-risks their environment. So no proprietary hardware was built for quality purposes and to be a modern company, and now more recently it's become strategic for customers. We are widely recognized for world-class customer support. We just, from day one, took out a blank sheet of paper and asked ourselves, if we were customers, how would we want to be treated? And we built the entire customer engagement model along those lines. If you look at things like Gartner Peer Insights or talk to peers that you have in your across IT, you'll very often hear Qumulo customer support often referenced as the best in the industry. We enable true hybrid environments. Qumulo today runs in all three major public clouds on Azure, GCP, and AWS. And of course, we run in your private cloud or your data center. And most importantly, for those cloud environments, you don't need to rewrite your applications or refactor them. The same Qumulo experience that you get, all the data services, the GUI, the reliability of Qumulo, the way that it interacts with protocols is identical when we run in the public cloud. And that enables customers to take whole applications, lift them up, move them to the public cloud without having to rewrite them. And that saves a lot of time and effort for developers. And importantly, in the public cloud, and unlike public cloud house brand file services, Qumulo offers massive scale. So very simply, customers can scale to multiple petabyte environments, and in some cases, billions of files in a single namespace in the public cloud. So the way to sort of think about that is that we freed the file system from proprietary hardware. We do that through software, and we allow customers to run on-prem and in the public cloud, always with an amazing customer experience. So you might be asking right now, well, what do I actually get? And here's one slide just to kind of represent that. On the middle part of your screen, you could see kind of a loose representation of what we see virtually all customers doing. There's some point in time when they're ingesting or creating or writing data. Most often they want to transform that data in one way or another. If it's a media and entertainment customer, they're rendering that data. If it's a life sciences customer, they're running genomic sequences and then reasoning over those sequences. So industry by industry, there's some sort of transformation event. And then data is useless unless you can get it in the hands of users. And so there's a publishing moment where you're opening up that data to allow people to get access to it and collaborate around it. And then eventually data cools off and customers want not necessarily to delete it, but to be able to archive it. This is represented as kind of a linear path, but for many of our customers, it's actually more of a circle, because very often data that's been archived becomes useful later, and customers want to bring it back into the life cycle. To be able to serve these types of pipelines, Qumulo has created a group of really fantastic data services. And I won't go through them all today, but you can see them in the middle of your screen there. Qumulo Scale allows you to get to massive petabyte scale in a single namespace very easily. Qumulo Perform is the way that we manage metadata, and we do that using machine learning algorithms to put metadata on the fastest media possible, and predict which users are going to be accessing data and get that metadata close to it. So we serve it up before the application even asks for it. Qumulo Aware is our set of data awareness features. That's what allows you to see your data. And in fact, I won't say much about that because we're going to demo that a little bit later. Qumulo Shift allows you to take files and shift them into S3 objects. Object services out there in the world are very powerful. They're very useful. And there's certainly a need for object in the world. And we took a very open approach to this, and included in your Qumulo software subscription, you're allowed to shift files into objects and conversely shift objects back into files to be able to enable workflows that want to take advantage of both. Qumulo Integrate is our API. Customers use this for all sorts of things, some ways that we anticipated as a company and some ways that always surprise us. But very often I go into a customer site, they've used the API to integrate, say, with Tableau, and they've picked out certain sets of the data or the pipeline that they want to be able to publish to their end users so that they can understand what's going on in their environment. And then, of course, you can't be in our business without having world-class protection and security. Data is the most important asset, maybe besides people, for every one of our customers. And so the idea of being able to promise customers that once they put a file on Qumulo, it will be there now and forever, and it will be there securely. So those are the set of data services that the file system offers. All of those are always included in a single subscription at Qumulo. We don't nickel and dime or make you pay for these things separately. They're always all inclusive. And then on the bottom, you can see the where. You can run Qumulo just about anywhere. So if you kind of boil all that up, this is what customers really tell us, right? You can scale as big as you want. Security comes standard. And by that, what I mean is through the power of software, all data on Qumulo is always encrypted at rest and in flight. And that's not done through proprietary hardware. You don't have to buy special self-encrypting drives. We just took the approach that we should do that through software. I'm, again, not going to talk about real-time visibility because that's much better shown through the demo. And then being able to integrate and automate workflows is important, and be able to run anywhere across public clouds is always important. I'm just going to build out this slide here. This is from our product team showing off. So one of the things that has been true at Qumulo from day one is that we're an agile software development company. And so every single 2 weeks, we upgrade our code. Now, as customers, you can use a quarterly upgrade process. Very often customers love to wait for the announcement that the upgrades after every 2 weeks are available because they want the newest features and changes as quickly as possible. But the real strategic takeaway from you as a customer is that there's constant innovation happening here. And on the slide, you can see some of the things that we've done over the last couple of years. I definitely won't go through all this, but if you engage with somebody at Qumulo and you ask questions about what we've done and what's new, you'll get a long list of Qumulo innovations, and that this will continue. So we consider ourselves really an innovation factory here at Qumulo, and that factory runs in 2-week increments, and the software constantly gets better, literally every month. So people like me, I'm biased, I'll admit that as CEO of the company, but it's really great to see us recognized by the industry. And one of the most recognized industry analysts is Gartner. And we have won our spot in the top right of their Magic Quadrant for distributed file and object storage 4 years running. And I will say also, and people like us really think about this, our little dot on that Magic Quadrant has not only been in the top right section, but has moved up into the right 4 years in a row. So that's a really cool testament and external validation that the things that we're doing really do matter. And the reason for that movement by the industry analysts, the reason for that recognition really comes down to these three things. The technology is awesome. It's award-winning, and it's not just Gartner, it's Gigamom and IDC and others that have recognized us. And one of the things that they do in addition to vetting the technology is they talk to customers about the customer support experience. And we measure it as a company. Every single quarter, we use the same exact NPS methodology. We don't trick it out or bias it in any way. And every single quarter, we have an increase in the number of respondents. And consistently now for the last 10 quarters, we've been running either in the high 80s or the low 90s. So last quarter was an 89. I think the quarter before it was a 90, and the quarter before that it was an 88. So it hovers in the kind of 80 to 90 range, which in the industry is just unbelievably high. Other companies like the legacy vendors would tout that they have NPS scores that are like in the high 30s. And that's really a testament to you as our customers and our customer success team that just has a maniacal, really customer obsession for making folks successful that use the product. I could talk about customers all day. We have somewhere between 600 and 650 now. And those customers are adopting Qumulo really across a range of industries. Some of our earliest customers were in media and in entertainment, and actually our guest speaker today is from that industry, but we've seen an explosion of customer adoption across healthcare and life sciences, government organizations. Higher ed has become an enormous user of Qumulo, which is really great to see because that's the next generation of technologists. Technology companies like Slack and F5 and Uber and others have adopted the product. The energy industry, and that's everything from the kind of old world petroleum companies, but to newer organizations that are not just trying to find the next source of petroleum, but also trying to tackle things like climate change. And then more recently, financial services has become a large market for us. It's been interesting. Financial services historically used to be a market that spent most of their time around structured data. But what we've seen more recently is that unstructured data applications have exploded in their space. And of course, they want modern technology to meet those challenges. And then lastly, in the manufacturing space, the customer adoption has just been enormous. Everything from the automotive customers, even to old world kind of agricultural companies. So customers really bring what we do to life. And so I'm just gonna give you 3 little vignettes of some recent customers that have adopted the product. The first one is Dayton's Children's Hospital. And we're really proud of our work with healthcare organizations because it turns out that the more money and time that they spend on infrastructure, there's a direct reduction in how much budgets those organizations have for patient care. And so we take our mission with healthcare really importantly, every one of us has to go to a hospital at some point in our lives. And if you thought that that healthcare organization was wasting their money on legacy infrastructure versus having the best doctors and nurses there to take care of you, you'd have an issue. And so that's why these healthcare organizations are adopting our product. They've found that with the elegance and the economics of Qumulo, they're able to save time and money and then redeploy those resources to where they really matter. In a totally different sector, something that's been really exciting for us, I mentioned this a second ago, is higher ed. San Diego State Supercomputing has become an enormous Qumulo customer. They actually kind of call Qumulo their campus cloud, and they deploy Qumulo for all the different research groups across the university. And one of the projects that they shared with us was an initiative to measure and monitor the California wildfires that took place about a year ago. And they do some really exciting work there. They look at the topography of the environment where the fire is taking place. They look at wind patterns, they look at temperature, and they build complex models to be able to understand what's really happening with these wildfires, so that they can action them, not just real time, but for the next event, have some predictive models to help firefighters take on the next wildfire when it happens. Again, these things are, they impact us all, and it's really cool to see organizations like SDSC taking on the challenge, and then it gives us special meaning to our mission when we know that we're part of that. And then the last one is an organization, again, back to media and entertainment, called Cinesight, that is responsible for a lot of content that we all like to view and watch on channels like Netflix. And this is an organization that's adopted Qumulo both in their data center, but also as a heavy public cloud user of the product. So I could talk about customers all day. In fact, as CEO, it's like the single best thing that best part of my job is interacting with customers, but there's probably no better way to do that than talk with an actual customer. My friend and partner, Jason Fodder from FuseFX, is going to jump on, and we're going to talk a little bit about his experience. But before we do, I think we have a little reel about some of the work that Fuse does right on top of Qumulo. Jason, I goosebumps when I see the reel. It's just so cool. And I was thinking about the little girl with her head on fire. I'm really glad that we do that with visual effects versus a stud actor.
Indeed, yeah. But for me, visual effects is a great business. I like to summarize it, and we can tell any story. You know, if you can imagine it, we can tell it, as long as you have enough time and budget. And it's really exciting to be in a kind of free world of telling any story like that. So at the end of the day, our business is about stories. You know, visual effects is highly technical, but we are a source for telling those stories for our clients.
And Jason, just for a little context, you're the founder and chief technology officer of FuseFX.
Right.
This was an organization that was started by some really talented people about 10 years ago. Do I have that?
The official start was 2006. I joined with another partner in 2008.
I got you. So, and the cool part to me is kind of growing together. Fuse started again with a small group of people that had a vision for being able to do visual effects in a different way and to be able to service some of the biggest studios out there. And now, how big is the organization?
Oh gosh, we are approaching about 1,000 employees. We are so Fuse. We have two partnerships with sister companies now. One in based out of Montreal, a company by the name of Folks. You probably saw, you know, their stuff on the reel. And more recently, we partnered up with Rising Sun Pictures out of Australia. So we're approaching about 10 locations around the globe and about 1,000 employees.
Well, that's awesome to have seen the business grow from, again, just a few smart people with a great vision into a 1,000-person organization that spans planet Earth. And I think I'm speaking for everyone, especially during the pandemic. We watched more content than we ever have. And, you know, it's part of what gives us joy in our life. And it's really great work. I'd love to ask you, I mean, maybe we'll just start with the beginning. I mean, you didn't use Qumulo for all those 15 years.
No.
What were you using before Qumulo, and what was kind of the initial impetus to change to Qumulo?
So, you know, way back in the day, we started up with a simple Isilon cluster. You know, back in 2010, I think they were kind of the high, you know, the company you went to and are in the media and entertainment world for scale out file storage. I became aware of Qumulo soon after that and was really intrigued by what I was seeing. Connected with you all, and we purchased very early on that 4-node QC208 cluster that is still in production, and was really excited about the product early on. Had a lot of aspirations of what to do with it, and worked with you guys to, over the years, build it up. As we started to grow as a company, one of the three big challenges of visual effects are people, resources, right? We're a people business. We need creative people to do the work. We create a tremendous amount of data, and we have very high demands for rendering for large compute farms. So that all together creates our complex environment. Add on the top, it's a creative business and things change all the time, can be very hectic and chaotic. So on the rendering front, you know, we were growing as a company. We had opened multiple offices, and I became aware of the cloud. I think this was back in 2014, 2015, very early on. I was like, oh, what's this cloud? I didn't know too much about it at the time. And I quickly learned, oh, I could spin up virtual compute in the cloud and help with kind of a release valve of our render demands. So we started doing that, and I started to run it. We did it kind of on our own, homegrown kind of system, standard Linux file server, and quickly realized that storage was the major bottleneck of being able to scale to what we wanted to in the cloud. That's when I started to talk to people at Qumulo about, hey, we've got this on-prem cluster that scales and meets the demands of our local farms, wouldn't it be great if I had something like that in the cloud? I was actually talking to every possible storage vendor I could at the time about this concept, because I was like, somebody's got to be thinking about this other than me. It felt like nobody was. I'd get a lot of lip service. I'd get a lot of, yeah, we could do that, and then crickets. And you guys were like, yeah, we could do that. And I think a couple of weeks later, we had a simple virtual server that was like, hey, would this work? And I was like, yeah, that would work. It was already faster than what we were using in our homegrown system. And it was like, if you can make this into a cluster, we're all in. That would be amazing. And I think literally a couple of weeks later, boom, there was a cloud cluster running on AWS. It was quite amazing. I think a testament to your customer service. We really feel that, and being able to quickly be agile and actually make that happen. I was very impressed with that. So that was really, really a cool experience. And I think we were, if not the first, one of your first cloud customers. So that's, exciting for myself. So we did that. And then I have a little story to tell about how we've been able to leverage not only our cloud customer, but the data analytics portion of your environment. So the cloud gives you limitless opportunity, right? Amazon will let you spin up thousands of compute instances at any time if you want. They have the spot market, which makes it cost effective for us. And sure, scaling is great, but at the end of the day, you need a file system that can support the demands of all those compute instances hitting it at the exact same time. In visual effects, it's all about throughput and IOPS. And that are the two main data points that you get on the Qumulo dashboard, throughput and IOPS. And I've always loved that dashboard because it tells you very quickly how your network is performing, because everything's hitting the same storage system. And we had a moment where we were rendering a job and we were, trying to hit production demands, and the IOPS were flatlining. You could see it on the storage system. It was just spiking up and creating a flat line on the graphs. And anytime that happens, something's wrong. We were able to drill down in and point to a single file on the file system in real time of a single file creating 60,000 IOPS on our cloud storage system. And that's not normal. There's something wrong there if a single file is generating that much demand on the file system. So we were able to decipher how we were creating the file. We reached out to our render third-party vendor, V-Ray, and asked, hey, what is this file? What does it do? Why is it generating so much performance on our file system? We can't get our stuff rendered. They hit us back and they said, that's a legacy workflow. V-Ray isn't really meant to use that file anymore. Here's an alternate way of working. Tell your artist to do this and all should be good. So we did, and lo and behold, problem solved. I really like that story because without being able to quickly drill down into that file, we could have spent weeks trying to figure out and chasing ghosts and trying to, decipher what is the real problem, and going into network and PCAPs and, I've been there and it's no fun. Being able to quickly say, yep, that's the problem, and we probably figured out a solution within a day. It was pretty awesome, and kept us running and kept us going. So I always love telling that story because it's a fun real world story, and it shows how we were able to really use the software you're making to our advantage. Fast forward to present day, we have recently installed all new Qumulo clusters as our primary storage system. I like the chart of your progression of software development, because we've been along the ride kind of since for all those years. And that early 208 QC 208 cluster was really great. We still were running other storage systems kind of in a tier 1 environment. And in 2019, Qumulo became our tier 1 provider across all locations. And that's, because finally, we were comfortable with all those features that were being developed and ready to implement that. So we're doing that now. And now what we're able to do is really take advantage of things like replication to and from the cloud. Whereas before we had a Qumulo cluster and a different storage system on-prem, We had to build our own replication systems. Now we're excited about using replication in that. And I'm really excited about Shift. You know, I've talked to many storage vendors that say they support S3. And really what they do is they write block level data to S3 that you have to put their software in front of it to access that data. I shy away from that. That doesn't really excite me too much. Being able to write files to objects and leverage S3 for the power that it is, transfer it to and from high performance file systems in our 10 location environment now, we're going to take advantage of that in the future for sure.
Jason, it's just great to hear what it's like as a practitioner and how you take advantage of these things. The file analytics were built for exactly those reasons, to be effectively to be able to see your data and then action it. And the number of reasons to do that are infinite, but having it there makes that easy. I think one thing that you do, and a lot of folks are curious about, is kind of running a hybrid environment. And you called it the relief valve. And I imagine in your business, demands change. So you might be kind of running steady state, and then there's a business opportunity to take on more work. But if you're stuck with a fixed amount of infrastructure, nobody wants to say no to revenue and opportunity. And is that more or less the way that it works at FuseFX for deciding whether something runs on-prem versus in the cloud?
A little bit. It's many things. The cloud is there for us to, like I said, open that relief valve when the need arises. It could be because we have extra work coming in. It could be because we're running into some render jobs that are just taking a really long time to achieve the creative output that we need. It could be that, you know, clients change their minds. They now want a spaceship in the scene where they didn't want a spaceship before, and you're 3 days from delivery and you've got to meet that demand. I've described the cloud as giving us the ability to make time a variable in the mix, because when you have on-premise infrastructure, it's a finite resource and you have 2 days to deliver. You got to figure out how to make that resource fit within those 2 days. Having the ability to turn the dial in the cloud and say, oh, we could do this amount of work and just scale up to this level. This is what it's going to cost, and we can hit that 2-day target. We have the ability to make those decisions, and we can make them quickly because we can quickly spin up and spin down the cloud. And it can be very cost effective because running massive scale for a couple of days, I've always said I get great pleasure out of turning it off. Because it's like, wow, so I was just able to triple my infrastructure with a few clicks of a button, and now I can turn it off and not pay for it anymore. It's very cool. And you know, back when I became aware of what the cloud was, that was the vision. It was like, oh wow, you could do this. I don't have to call rental companies and figure out if I have rack space and enough power and are my AC system's going to hold up. And well, boy, it's going to take some time, and we're going to, put our machine image, and half of them are not going to work because they don't have an updated BIOS, or all of the complexities of trying to do it locally. We have custom AMIs in AWS and a custom solution that you just fire up a spot request and say, give me 500 of these, and boom, they're there.
That sort of flexibility, business flexibility, I think is huge. And we started launching Qumulo in the public cloud about 4 or 5 years ago, and the adoption keeps increasing. And then during the pandemic, we saw that sort of surge because getting people into data centers and actually more recently supply chain constraints have sort of have been a catalyst for customers to say, hey, what are the other ways that I can solve this problem? And so I think you're very much a trailblazer in terms of being able to run hybrid environments. And now that's becoming quite standard here here at Qumulo. Okay, Jason, well, you've come on and you've shared, and the sizzle reel is awesome. We all want to go watch more of that. I mean, you've a lot of that roadmap development is because we like talking to trailblazers, and if they see something or an opportunity, it very well turn out that actually most of the market will need that. So we'd like to go after it. Give us one challenge or one request or one parting thoughts so that we can keep living up to your standards as your partner.
The next big challenge for us is, how do we think about being a global company? How do we think about sharing work effectively and having data storage be as simplistic as possible underneath all of that, right? We have performance demands for our internal users. Artists run high-powered software. They need high performance access both at the file level and the user experience level. So thinking about how to transfer data easily, how to co-locate and provide an experience to end users, what that all looks like, and how to architect that complex solution and make it as simplistic as possible. Because, you know, I talked about the cloud being the technical release valve. The other challenge in the visual effects business is people and artists. And if you've got 30 free artists in this location that can do work for a certain amount of time, you want to be able to easily transition the data sets to that and their environment. You can do it in interesting ways. You can provide like a Teradici type remote access machine, or maybe move the data. And Qumulo being at the core of that, providing features for us to do that in a most effective way is the next thing that I am after.
Okay, challenge accepted. And I don't think you're alone in building global organizations where you want storage not just to be simple, but almost to be invisible. And we love that idea. Hey, Jason, I know you're super busy. I'm absolutely delighted that you came on and shared a bit with the gang that joined this Connect, and I'll just send a huge thank you on behalf of the whole company for being a great partner. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you as well.
Okay, Jason talked a lot about how he uses it, but I think a lot of people on the call are probably like, well, what is it and how can I see it? And so we're going to do a little demo here, and I'm going to turn it over to a great Qumulan, David Risley, who's going to take take us through what the product actually looks like. So David, over to you.
Thanks very much, Bill. Appreciate it. Yeah, so wanted to just go through a quick demo of what replication looks like and what standing a Qumulo cluster up in AWS actually looks like. So in this demo, I'm going to walk through the steps of creating a cluster inside of AWS, setting up replication from an existing on-prem Qumulo cluster to the cluster in AWS, failing over primary to a target in AWS, and then failing back to the primary on-prem cluster again. So this is the whole process of standing up Qumulo in AWS, configuring replication, simulating a DR event, fail over, and then fail back. So the first thing that we're going to do here is to log into our AWS environment, and you'll see that currently there are no Qumulo clusters running here. So nothing to see right now. And what we're going to do is to deploy a new cluster by running a terraform script, which will provision the entire Qumulo cluster for us inside of AWS with just a couple of clicks here. So this is a process that takes about 2 minutes to run, and it's going to stand up a complete cluster that's ready to have data written to it. So while this runs, we're going to flip back over here to the AWS console, refresh the stacks, and you'll see that we now have a Qumulo cluster that's currently in the process of being created. So through the magic of a pre-recorded demo and speeding up time, we can see that our provisioning process has completed, the Terraform script has finished, and now what I can do is actually log into the user interface on that Qumulo cluster using the username admin and the password that gets provided by our stack output. And once we've logged in, this is where you can see that dashboard that Jason was mentioning. And you can see it's a brand new cluster. There's no data out here, not a lot to see. in terms of the analytics and things like that. And if I go in and look at our, the default shares that are here, if I look at the SMB shares, I can see that the default share files is there, which is just something that gets created when the cluster itself is formed. But nothing else, in terms of other data or other files or other shares are out here. So the first thing that I want to do, and kind of a best practice, is to change the admin password from the password that got generated by the Terraform script to something that meets our security requirements, and importantly, something that we can remember. So I'm going to change that now. And once that's done, the next thing I want to do is actually connect to this cluster from my client here. So to do that, I'll open up a File Explorer window. And I didn't configure DNS, so I'm just going to grab the IP address from the AWS cluster we created. And I'll need to authenticate with the username and password that I just made. So admin and then the password that I set. And once I'm in, I can again see that files share, but there's no data out here. And again, nothing's running in this cluster in AWS. So what I do want to do is connect to a local on-prem Qumulo cluster that does have some data. And so again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a file browser and browse to the cluster that's called Qumulo 1. And since this is a different file system, I'll need to enter my credentials again. And when I'm logged in here, you'll see that now there is some data. There's a couple of shares that are created. So we do have a cluster with a little bit of data out here, so that's great. And I'll go ahead and log into the user interface for this cluster. And again, not a ton to see out here from an analytics perspective in terms of performance or things like that. But what you do see is that there's a bit of data out here, a couple of files and directories. And that's all we need for this demo of showing you how to set up a replication relationship to our AWS cluster that we created. So to do that, I'm going to create a replication relationship. And on the on-premise, which is the source cluster, I can choose what directories I want to replicate. And in this case, I'm going to replicate the entire root directory on down and keep the same destination directory on the target. So I need the IP address of the AWS cluster I'm going to replicate to. And I'll go back to the on-prem cluster, put that in, and say save relationship. So now what you'll see is that the cluster is going to wait for me to approve this, to basically authorize this replication relationship on the target cluster. So I'll go to the AWS cluster, and it's going to let me know there's a pending request. I'm going to approve it. And once it's approved, if I go back over to the primary side, I can see that the replication process has already begun. And I can view the details of this replication relationship, where I can see things like throughput, how long since the last replication occurred, how much data has changed, how many files need to be replicated, and so on. So a lot of detail about what's going to be replicated. And while this is running, if I go back over and begin to look at my file system in AWS, you'll see that I now have the same NFS and SMB directories inside of my file share on the Qumulo cluster running in AWS. So keep in mind that when we create a replication relationship, the file system on the primary side is read-writable, but the target is read-only. So let's say that if I want to take a file, let's say this Ice Age folder, and try to drop it onto the target cluster, you'll see that I can't do this. I'll be told that access is denied, and I can't currently write to the file system. But if I take that same folder and I drag and drop it onto my source cluster, the on-prem cluster, you'll see that it does start to copy. And in fact, because we set up that replication relationship, within a few seconds, we should see that the Qumulo cluster in AWS will begin to be populated with that new data. There it is. So now that the replication has occurred, I can compare the contents of these folders. I can see that they match. And so I've demonstrated quickly creating a Qumulo cluster in AWS, replicating some existing data to it. Let's simulate a scenario where my primary cluster needs to go offline for some reason, maybe for a maintenance activity or maybe a DR event. So the easiest way to simulate this is to simply shut down the primary cluster, which I can do from the user interface. And of course, when I shut this cluster down, I no longer will have access to my on-premises, Qumulo cluster, which had been the primary side of the data. So if I go back and try to browse into those folders, you'll see that I just have the spinning wheel of death over here, but I still do have access to that data on the target side, which is still running in AWS. So this target side is still read-only. So the first thing that I need to do is on the user interface for this cluster, I need to view the replication relationship and make the target writable. So I'll see a dialog box that's going to tell me what changes are going to be made as part of this process. And I'm going to click yes, please make this writable. Then I'm going to come over to my data, and let's say that I want to move a twister folder into that new cluster. You'll see that this time I can write data, and the data is going to begin copying into AWS. So while that continues to copy, someone's going to run out to the data center and power back on our on-premises cluster. Fortunately, this DR event didn't take too long. And if I go and look at the user interface on that cluster that's coming back up, we'll see that it's still offline, but once it's back online, this page is going to refresh, let me know the cluster is back, and then we'll be able to reconfigure our replication relationship. So here, what I can see if I look at the replication status is that the replication relationship is disconnected, and the target side is writable. So because we've made some changes on the AWS side and we don't want that data to be lost, that was new during this DR event, we're going to make sure we replicate those changes back to the primary file system. So first thing is we need to wait for our data to be copied, wait for that to finish. Okay, so that's done now. And so what I'm going to do is come into the user interface on the AWS cluster, and I want to reverse the relationship, which is going to give me another dialog box confirming the changes that I'm going to make. And I also need to confirm the IP address of the system I'm going to be replicating back to. And then we'll reverse the relationship. So the next thing we'll do is to reconnect this relationship on the on-prem side. So in the UI for the on-prem cluster, we'll go ahead and reconnect the relationship there. And it tells me that currently the source is the Qumulo file system in AWS. After this change, the relationship is going to be reversed. And of course, the on-prem will be read-only, as that's temporarily going to be the target. So if I go and look at my File Explorer windows, notice that the on-prem cluster now should already have our data populated out there. And so we can see that that data is there. And so now what I want to do is I want to switch this back and go ahead and make my on-prem cluster once again the primary source system. And so this process is really as easy as going back into the replication relationships and making the target, which is currently the on-prem cluster, writable again. And then I want to reverse this relationship. And then on the AWS side, I simply need to reconnect the relationship, which tells me that my end result here is going to be the Qumulo file system on premises is going to be writable, and the Qumulo in AWS will once again be my read-only target. And that's it. So that's the process of failing over and failing back your data between an on-prem cluster and a cluster in AWS.
Hey, thanks, David. And I mean, just to maybe summarize, this is a customer. Imagine you have an on-prem environment. You want to leverage the public cloud. The work it takes to stand up a Qumulo environment in the public cloud, the work it takes to move data to that environment, and then maybe even moving forward to almost a disaster recovery scenario where you might want to shut down your on-prem environment, or it shuts down because of a reason beyond your control, and your business stays up and running. And that took about 10 minutes, which is pretty awesome. And there's lots of people around here at Qumulo to help you go through that work. So we geek out on this stuff because we love it and we think it's important for customers, and that's a little show and tell. So thanks, David. I know we are just coming up and we're just about out of time. There are a few questions. Is that right, Nicole? Can we grab, do you have time for a few?
Yeah, we have time for a few. And then if we don't get to anyone's question, we'll make sure to follow up within the next day or so. Okay, so the first question, Dave, I think this one's for you. It says, you showed replication and failover/failback for an on-premises cluster to the cloud. Is the process any different if this was cloud to cloud or on-prem to on-prem?
That's a great question. So no, it's the Qumulo software is the same whether it's deployed on premises or in the cloud. So the experience and steps involved would be the same.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. Bill, I think this one is for you. What were some challenges Qumulo faced when your company started 10 years ago versus what technical challenges do you see now into the future?
Well, that's a fun question. Look, the thing that's really tough in our business as building a file system company where the world can trust the platform now and forever is that there's an immense amount of work that goes into building the fundamentals. And that was some of the hardest work that we did early on, building a protection scheme that could scale and protect billions of files in a single environment. And so in the early days of Qumulo, the focus for us was just on making sure that we had a very thick and sound foundation on which we could innovate. And there's this fundamental promise that we make all of our customers: if you put data on Qumulo, it'll be there for now and forever. But more recently, the work that we've done is to allow customers choice and freedom and mobility. And David showed that with being able to take your data and applications and move them from on-prem to a public cloud, or like the audience member asked, from one public cloud to another. And then as time passes in the future, Jason sort of gave us a great challenge, which is like, hey, how do I manage at scale? And how do I manage globally? Because what we've seen is the vast majority of Qumulo investment customers don't just have one environment, they have multiple environments. And so being able to allow customers to transparently manage global operations using Qumulo is something that's becoming more and more interesting to us. And that's just based on feedback that we hear from customers all the time. So there's quite a progression that we've made as a company. And the thing that's constant through the progression is innovation. We will not stop because the world won't stop, and we want to stay ahead of it.
All right, we will get through one more question. Like I said, if we don't get to your question, we will be following up. Are updates to cloud versions the same process as on-prem, and do versions need to be the same for replication?
I'll take that one. So the updates in the cloud are the same. It's the same process that you would use with an on-prem Qumulo cluster. And to replicate, they don't need to be identical versions, but there is they do need to be within a few iterations of each other. That would be the type of question that you could easily reach out to customer success, and they'd be able to give you let you know if the versions you want to replicate between would be supported or not, or if you need to do an update first. But it's pretty flexible, but you would want to just validate that first.
Well, Nicole, I see a few more questions, but we have everyone's name, so we'll just reach out to you directly. But I do want to be respectful of everybody's time, and so why don't I turn it back over to you to wrap us up, Nicole?
Yep, sounds great. My thoughts exactly. Yep, so that concludes our event. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to our wonderful speakers as well. We'll be following up. We will have the 2 prize winners who asked questions who will be reached out to on Monday, and everyone will be receiving their $30 Uber Eats voucher by Friday. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful Thanksgiving next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye.